A 64-year-old woman stepped onto the stage outside Buckingham Palace for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee concert and started singing "Slave to the Rhythm" with a hula hoop already moving at her waist. She kept it spinning through almost the entire performance. Voice steady, pace steady, no little pause to show you the effort. The crowd reacted like they'd just watched stamina and stagecraft land at the same time. By the next day, the clips were everywhere, and a question resurfaced for a new generation. Who is she, and why does she still look untouchable doing this? Stamina is part of it, but that isn't what makes the moment stick. What you're seeing is control over her body, her image, and the way she refuses to shrink in public. Grace Jones built that control long before the world started calling her an icon. Disco didn't invent her, and disco's collapse didn't end her. She kept moving through each era like it was material, shaping it until it carried her. Signature. But what actually happened to the woman who was supposed to be a time capsule of a dead scene? How did she outlast the trends that swallowed her peers, then become the blueprint for the stars who came after her? That kind of durability doesn't start on a palace stage. It starts much earlier, in a house where control was taught the hard way. Grace Beverly Jones was born on May 19, 1948, in Spanish Town, Jamaica. She has described her early life as being crushed underneath the Bible, a phrase that captures what religion felt like in that house. Pressure, enforced and constant. Her father, Bishop Robert W. Jones, was a Pentecostal preacher. In that world, obedience wasn't optional. It functioned like law, and law came with punishment. Jones has spoken about beatings in childhood, delivered for small mistakes, and about how the fear stayed in the body long after the bruises faded. Those memories matter because they explain the engine of her personality. Discipline learned under force, then taken back and repurposed. A child who learns to survive strict control often becomes either fragile or calculating. Jones became calculating. That discipline didn't produce silence, it produced precision. She learned how to stay calm inside pressure, how to read power, and how to choose exactly what to reveal and what to withhold. Later, when people called her wild, she pushed back. Wild wasn't the right word. Control was the ability to decide what you show, what you keep, and what you simply won't negotiate. As a teenager, she left Jamaica for Syracuse, New York, to join her parents, who had moved earlier. Upstate New York was colder in weather and colder in temperature, too. Jones stepped into American racial politics, American class expectations, and a culture that told Black girls to be grateful for any space they were offered. She wasn't built for gratitude. She studied theater at Onondaga Community College, and she worked to pay for life. One job became its own story. She used the surname Mendoza while working as a go-go dancer because she didn't want her parents to know what she was doing. That choice shows how early she understood branding. Even before the world knew her, she was separating identities, protecting one version of herself while another version earned money under lights. The strict house didn't create an obedient daughter. It created a performer who could endure discomfort, keep her face still, and execute a plan. That's the foundation under everything that comes later. The famous icy stare doesn't begin on a runway. It begins in a room where a child learns not to flinch. By the late 1960s, Jones was in New York, stepping into an industry that claimed it loved different, as long as different still fit inside a narrow template. She was tall, around 6 feet. Her features were sharp and angular. Her body could read as androgynous in a fashion world that still treated femininity as a required accessory. She signed with Wilhelmina Models and started working, but she also made a decision that shaped how the camera would see her. She cut away the soft signals. In the late 1960s, she shaved her head. She later explained that the look made her feel more abstract, less tied to a single idea of race or sex. The choice was deliberate. It was design. New York could book her, but Paris could celebrate her. After moving to Paris, she worked for fashion houses such as Yves Saint Laurent and Kenzo, and she appeared on covers including Elle and Vogue Homme. Photographers like Helmut Newton, Guy Bourdin, and Hans Fierer shot her, and the images didn't flatten her into sweetness. They leaned into her severity. Paris also placed her in the orbit of nightlife where style and power mixed every night. She frequented Le Sept, a club that functioned like a headquarters for the fashion set. People in that circle dressed for attention, but they also treated style like an experiment in identity, and Jones was already ahead of that game. For a period, she shared an apartment in Paris with Jessica Lange. Lange has spoken publicly about living with Jones and being discovered as a model during that time. It's a small detail that does big work. It shows that Jones's life wasn't separated into neat chapters. Fashion, art, music, and cinema were all in the same room, and Jones moved through it like she belonged there. She also became one of the most visible black models of the 1970s, in an industry that was still openly biased about who could represent luxury. She didn't win by softening herself. She won by being too specific to ignore. The runway trained her body. Paris trained her myth. Fashion gave her visibility. It didn't give her enough space. In 1977, she signed with Island Records. The label put her in the studio with disco producer Tom Moulton and built a sound around her that fit the nightlife moment. Portfolio, fame, and muse made her a club figure at the moment New York clubs were shaping taste. Studio 54 became part of the story because Studio 54 was a stage, and Jones was born for staged environments. She understood the velvet rope as theater. She understood that the room itself was a camera, and she moved like someone who knew where every lens was pointing. Her audience in that era leaned heavily queer, and the bond was real. Queer nightlife didn't just accept Jones's ambiguity, it recognized it. She earned the nickname Queen of the Gay Discos on the strength of how she carried herself. No flinching, no translation, no request for permission. The records were disco, but Jones was never only disco. Even in that first wave, she wasn't a smiley pop frontwoman. She sang with a contralto that could sound like a warning. She turned flirtation into challenge. She didn't sell warmth. She sold presence. At the same time, the culture was shifting. The backlash sharpened fast, and it went beyond sound. It touched who had been owning the dance floor and who suddenly got treated like a problem once the party went mainstream. When it finally boiled over, through public anti-disco stunts and a sudden turn in radio programming, many disco artists got stranded. She saw the wave turning and started moving before it crashed. When the backlash hit, she didn't defend disco. She changed the shape of her sound. At Island Records, she began working with the Compass Point All-Stars at Compass Point Studios in Nassau, with producers including Chris Blackwell and Alex Sadkin, and the rhythm section anchored by Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare. The sound shifted away from disco's smooth glide and into something harsher, dubbed out, modern. Warm Leatherette announced the break. That same year, Private Life, her cover of a Pretenders song, became her first UK chart entry, peaking at number 17. The single mattered because it showed how quickly she could move once she committed to a new identity. The visuals tightened too, close-ups that turned her face into architecture. Nothing about it asked for entry. It challenged you to hold your gaze. Jones didn't approach reinvention like a public apology. She approached it like a takeover. She covered material that belonged to punk and post-punk worlds. Joy. Division's She's Lost Control is a key example, and she didn't mimic the originals. She converted them into her own language, cool, distant, exact. Nightclubbing followed in 1981 and became the statement people still point to. The album fused reggae, dub, funk, and new wave attitude. She covered songs that didn't belong to her on paper, like Iggy Pop's Nightclubbing, Bill Withers's Use Me, and Roxy Music's Love is the Drug, and made them feel like they had been waiting for her voice. NME ranked Nightclubbing as its album of the year. Nightclubbing wasn't an isolated win. It sat inside what fans now treat as a Compass Point trilogy: Warm Leatherette, Nightclubbing, and Living My Life. Living My Life kept the Nassau muscle but widened the angles. My Jamaican Guy flashes back to home with a sharp grin, while the rest stays roomy with dub space and hard rhythm. What mattered was that she'd found a sonic frame strong enough to carry her without sanding her down. That record also produced one of her signature hits, Pull Up to the Bumper, a song built on a sly double meaning that flirted with taboo without spelling it out. In 1981, it reached number 2 on Billboard's Hot Dance Club Songs chart and became her first major transatlantic breakthrough. She moved past disco's collapse and started reshaping what dance music could sound like when it stopped trying to behave. The music pivot was real, but her visual pivot was even sharper. Jean-Paul Goude became her creative partner and, for a period, her romantic partner. Their relationship began around 1977 and shaped the most famous phase of her imagery. The flat-top haircut, the severe tailoring, the sculptural poses, the tight control of silhouette all point to deliberate design. Every detail served a strategy. Goude has spoken about emphasizing Jones's masculinity and using what some people treated as wrong about her as the source of her power. Their collaboration also produced something personal. Jones and Goude had a son, Paolo, born on November 12, 1979. The industry worried, then followed. Jones didn't cross over. She forced the culture to expand. The early 1980s are where Jones stops reading like a performer and starts reading like an art project that refuses to end. In 1981 and 1982, Jones and Goude developed a one-man show, a touring production that blended concert, fashion, and staged imagery. It was filmed and released as a long-form concert video, later earning a Grammy nomination. The show treated identity as something you could multiply. Jones could appear as creature, mannequin, sculpture, and star, sometimes in the same sequence, forcing the audience to accept that a public self can be assembled and reassembled on command. The collaborations around her intensified. Andy Warhol created a portrait of Jones in 1984, placing her inside his language of celebrity as icon. Keith Haring painted her body in his bold graphic patterns for a 1985 performance at Paradise Garage, turning her into a moving canvas. These acts functioned as declarations. The boundary between musician, model, and artwork was dissolving in real time. Helmut Newton shot Jones in images that leaned into dominance rather than softness. She didn't need to be dressed to feel dangerous. She could stand still and look like a threat. Then came Island Life in 1985, the compilation album that carried Goude's most famous image. The cover pose looks like an athletic miracle, but it was assembled from separate photographs, cut and joined until the body became a new shape. The illusion is clean enough to make you stare twice. That's the point. The image gets the final word, not the limits of anatomy. That cover has been imitated for decades because it's a pose and a thesis about control. When Nicki Minaj echoed the image in the Stupid Hoe video in 2012, the reference was direct. The reason it stays reference-worthy is simple. It doesn't belong to a decade. It belongs to a mythology. If Island Life made her an icon on paper, Slave to the Rhythm, released in October 1985, made her an icon in motion, produced by Trevor Horn. The album was built as a concept, subtitled A Biography, with multiple versions of the same title track stitched together with spoken sections and interview fragments. Actor Ian McShane delivered the opening spoken introduction, turning the record into a kind of ritual entrance. It was a daring choice. One song, many faces, all of them pointing back toward her. The visuals hit just as hard. Around this period, Goude's imagery pushed beyond fashion photography and into something closer to graphic design. The famous cut-up face motif from Slave to the Rhythm artwork reinforced the same message as Island Life. The body, the face, the self, everything could be rearranged when the artist decided it should be. Jones never sold authenticity as a confession. She sold authorship, proof that the self can be arranged on purpose. Through all of this, there's a risk in the story that a lot of profiles miss. Collaboration can turn into control. Goude shaped the public image, but Jones's career didn't become his. She kept agency by treating her persona as her property. She used collaboration as a tool, not a cage, and she walked away from anything that tried to own her. The body as canvas was never surrender. It was ownership. By the mid-1980s, Hollywood understood something fashion and clubs already knew. Jones could enter a frame and change the temperature instantly. In 1984, she appeared as Zula in Conan the Destroyer, a warrior role that matched her physical authority. In 1985, she played Mayday in the James Bond film A View to a Kill, cast opposite Roger Moore and Christopher Walken. Mayday wasn't written as a conventional accessory. She felt like a force with her own gravity, and she remains one of the most memorable villains in the Bond series. Her private life also fed the mythology in ways that weren't always under her control. During the mid-1980s, she dated Dolph Lundgren, who worked as her bodyguard and later appeared in A View to a Kill in a small role. The pairing mattered less as gossip than as a visual symbol. Jones beside someone built like a weapon, yet still reading as the one in charge. She didn't need a man to soften her image. If anything, she used men as props the way other stars used feather boas. Jones didn't rely on dialogue. She relied on impact. She didn't need to explain why she was dangerous. She made you believe it, then left you to manage your own discomfort. Her acting continued through the decade. In Vamp, she played a nightclub vampire whose visual presence leaned into the same aesthetics that made her performances feel like art installations. Later, in Boomerang, she played Helen Strange, a parody of high-fashion excess that still carried the threat of someone who might actually mean it. Outside film sets, her demand for respect became part of the legend. On November 18, 1980, during a live BBC interview on The Russell Hardy Show, she struck the host after he repeatedly turned away from her to address other guests. The moment shocked viewers, then hardened into a story people kept retelling for decades. Whatever you think of the reaction, the message was unmistakable. Dismiss her in public, and she won't sit quietly inside your frame. That refusal is part of what made her magnetic. It's also what made her difficult to manage. Jones didn't offer access. She offered presence, then demanded you meet it. By the 1990s, Jones had become a reference point, which is a strange kind of victory. It means your influence is secure. It also means the world starts trying to freeze you in place. She didn't let it. After Bulletproof Heart in 1989, she went nearly 2 decades without releasing another studio album. Hurricane arrived in 2008, built with producer Ivor Guest and shaped by songs that pulled directly from her life. The record avoids nostalgia and moves forward on her terms, including William's Blood, which centers family history and the emotional cost of the past, and Corporate Cannibal, which turns her voice into a cold, mechanical threat aimed at modern power. Even during the gap, she didn't disappear. She toured, performed, and showed up in carefully chosen places. She made herself scarce enough that an appearance still felt like an event, not a routine. Then came the moment that reintroduced her to people who weren't alive for Studio 54. In June 2012, during the Diamond Jubilee celebrations for Queen Elizabeth II, a concert was staged outside Buckingham Palace. Jones took the stage at 64 and performed Slave to the Rhythm while hula hooping continuously through the song. The footage spread because it didn't look like an older star doing a victory lap. It looked like stamina. It looked like someone treating age as irrelevant. The performance worked because it didn't ask for admiration. It took it. The hoop wasn't a gimmick, it was a dare. If you're watching, you're going to watch all the way through. What people missed in the headlines was how consistent the moment was with her whole career. Jones has always treated performance as physical work. She built shows around movement, posture, and stamina, but she also understood the power of stillness. She can freeze in a costume that should swallow her and make the room feel smaller, then break the spell with one line and one look. That kind of control comes from repetition and training, from knowing exactly what your body can do and refusing to let nerves run the show. The clip also reminded people that her charisma isn't pinned to one era. She moves through scenes, takes what she wants, then leaves them wearing her fingerprints. When she returns to a stage, she doesn't chase the crowd's mood. She sets it. That's why the footage didn't feel like an old act. It felt like the same artist, still operating by those rules, with more years behind her and no need to prove anything. Jones has been blunt in interviews about refusing cosmetic surgery. Her approach to aging stays consistent. Choose what's yours to shape and ignore the rest. In later years, she allowed the camera back in on her terms. Sophie Fiennes' documentary, Grace Jones, Bloodlight and Balmy, follows her across performances, studio work, and time in Jamaica, capturing the way she manages control, even in supposedly candid moments. The film doesn't explain her into simplicity. It lets her stay complicated, funny, strict, and unpredictable, the same qualities that powered every pivot in the first place. By now, Jones's influence is so embedded in pop culture that people can copy her without realizing they're copying her. The template is visible: sculptural styling, gender play, high fashion as armor, performance as confrontation, the refusal to soften for comfort. Those ideas didn't begin with her, but she made them mainstream in a way that left fingerprints everywhere. Rihanna's fearless fashion is part of that lineage. So is the way modern pop treats avant-garde styling as routine. So is the way performers borrow the language of provocation to sell confidence. The difference is that Jones's provocation never needed a marketing department. It was the product of a woman who built her own myth because the culture didn't have a slot ready for her. Lady Gaga said in a 2009 Vogue interview that her style icons were Grace Jones and Jesus, and she later pursued a collaboration. Jones declined and said she preferred working with someone she saw as more original. The exchange reads as principle, not spite. Jones was protecting creative ownership. She has watched other people profit from shocks she absorbed first. In 2015, when her memoir, I'll Never Write My Memoirs, arrived, written with Paul Morley, Jones finally let some of the machinery show. The book doesn't read like a tidy confessional. It reads like her, blunt, funny, sometimes tender, then suddenly sharp again. She talks about discipline as survival, about the price of being visible, and about how quickly an industry will celebrate you and still refuse to protect you. She also makes the logic of her mystique sound practical rather than mystical. Give the public too much and they stop looking. Disappear long enough and your return becomes an event. A romantic theory of fame doesn't explain that kind of timing. What explains it is business sense, learned by someone who watched the culture churn through Black women and then act like it never met them. In the memoir, she wrote about younger stars dressing and behaving as if they were still challenging the status quo. Her point was simple: the road is already paved. The shock has been normalized. If you want to claim rebellion now, you need to do more than put on the uniform. She also framed the cost of being first. Too often, she said, she opened doors without being the main beneficiary of what came through them. The culture loves pioneers as long as it doesn't have to pay them. Still, the influence never turns into replacement. Nobody can reproduce the particular mix Jones carries: discipline from a strict childhood, fashion training, club intelligence, and a voice that can sound like seduction or threat depending on the angle of the light. In 2022, Beyoncé released Renaissance, an album built as a celebration of dance floor culture and its Black and queer foundations, and Jones appeared as a featured voice on the track Move. That collaboration felt like a closing of a loop: dance music evolving, fashion shifting, the club remaining a site of power, and Jones still present, unmistakable. Grace Jones has never been easy to summarize, and that's part of the point. She has always treated the public as an audience, not a confidant. She offers the image, the performance, the silhouette, the stare, then keeps the rest. The famous 1985 cover still hits as more than a visual trick. It's a statement about method. Reality can be cut, arranged, and reassembled when you refuse the default version. From a strict Jamaican childhood to Paris runways, from Studio 54 to dub-heavy reinvention, from Warhol portraits to hula hoops in front of Buckingham Palace, she kept choosing the harder path, the one where you control your own shape. The culture keeps trying to answer her. She keeps making new questions. Back in 1979, Ebony magazine described her as a question mark followed by an exclamation point. It still fits, because she never offered the comfort of an easy conclusion. She gave you the exclamation, shock, style, impact, then left the question hanging. In an era that demands constant access, that refusal has become its own kind of power, and that might be the most faithful definition of what really happened to Grace Jones. She made mystery into a form of power, then made power last.